The moment the doors of the Met cloisters opened, all conversation died as if the entire hall inhaled at once. Under the soaring medieval arches, surrounded by candlelit stone walls and priceless tapestries, New York's most powerful figures turned toward the entrance toward her. Madeline Harper. The woman everyone thought had disappeared after her humiliating divorce. The woman her ex-husband, Bradley Stone, had painted as unstable, fragile, and unfit for the Manhattan elite. The woman the tabloids labeled the silent wife because she said nothing, not in court, not to the press, not even when Bradley paraded his mistress across Manhattan. Yet, she stood there now, radiant in an understated black silk gown that draped over her like liquid night. Her hair swept back, diamonds glinting subtly at her ears. She looked nothing like the quiet, frightened woman forced out of the Tribeca loft months ago. But it wasn't just her transformation that froze the room. It was the man whose arm she held. Ethan Callahan. The reclusive billionaire. The man who built a data empire from a single laptop in a cramped Boston dorm room. The man whose face rarely appeared on camera, but whose influence touched every major corporation from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. And tonight, he had brought Maddie. He didn't guide her, didn't parade her. He walked with her equal pace, equal presence, equal power. The orchestra's strings faltered for the slightest second. Cameras lifted. Society wives exchanged quick, anxious glances. Executives whispered like their lives depended on understanding what they were seeing. Maddie Harper, the ex-wife they pitied, mocked, or ignored, now entered New York's most exclusive gala on the arm of a man worth $47 billion. In the far corner, Bradley Stone nearly choked on his champagne. He stood beside Lacey Morgan, the woman he'd left Maddie for. His grip on the glass tightened until his knuckles whitened. Lacey's perfectly glossed smile faltered as she followed his stunned gaze. Maddie didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Her silence, once mocked, now thundered through the hall louder than any scream she could have given during the divorce. Ethan leaned down slightly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You're doing fine," he murmured. "You belong in rooms like this." The words shouldn't have meant anything. They shouldn't have made her chest tighten with something warm, something terrifying, something like being seen for the first time. Whispers erupted. "Is that really her? How did she? Bradley must be dying right now. Thanks for watching. Did you hear she signed away everything? But look at her now." And then, the twist no one in the room was prepared for. Maddie's eyes lifted just briefly, landing on Bradley at the exact moment his political donor, Harold Voss, turned to him and hissed, "You didn't tell us your ex-wife knew Callahan." Bradley's world, built on lies, manipulation, and arrogance, began to crack in real time. And this was only the beginning. Before Manhattan swallowed her whole, Madeline Harper had been just a girl from Minneapolis with a second-hand iPhone, a public library card, and a dream she couldn't even say out loud. No one in her family had ever left Minnesota, let alone gone to New York, but Maddie was born with a quiet fire that didn't match the cold winters she grew up in. She was the middle child, the invisible one, the girl who did everything right so nobody had to worry about her. Straight-A student, soft-spoken, never caused trouble. Her father worked maintenance at a community college. Her mother worked nights at a clinic. Money was tight, but they always made space for hope. When Maddie received a partial scholarship to NYU for data science, her parents hugged her like she had already changed the family's fate. At 22, she arrived in Manhattan with one suitcase, $700 saved from tutoring jobs, and a heart full of belief. The city did not care. She rented a tiny, windowless room in Queens with 2 roommates who barely acknowledged her. Every day, she rode the packed subway to her internship at a financial analytics firm, unpaid, of course, while juggling evening classes and weekend jobs. She learned to drink cheap coffee, stretch instant noodles into 2 meals, and study on a cracked MacBook Air she bought off Craigslist. Still, she was happy. Because she was building something. Because she felt possibilities everywhere on subway platforms, in skyscraper reflections, in the rapid-soaked streets of Midtown. And then she met him, Bradley Stone. It happened during a networking mixer her supervisor forced the interns to attend. The event took place on a penthouse terrace overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the kind of place Maddie never imagined she'd stand in without being mistaken for waitstaff. Bradley strode toward her like a man who believed the universe bent in his direction. Tall, charming, expensive smile, Rolex glinting in the city lights. She didn't understand why someone like him spoke to someone like her. But he did. And he was warm, interested, curious about her work, her dreams, her mind. For the first time, Maddie felt visible. They talked for hours. He told her she was brilliant, told her she was different from the jaded New York interns, told her she had something rare, as if he could see into her future. She didn't know he was already working on molding that future to fit his plans. Within months, he was everywhere, texting her, bringing her lunch to campus, showing up at her internship with Starbucks when she was drowning in assignments. He learned her schedule, her habits, her fears. He made her feel protected in a city that often chewed her up. By the time she graduated, he had completely woven himself into her life. Looking back, Maddie could now see the early signs. How he praised her intelligence but subtly discouraged her ambition. How he framed himself as the stable one, the leader, the one who knew the world better than she did. How he gently suggested she shouldn't burn out over work and didn't need to compete with sharks. And she believed him. Because no one ever told her that love could look exactly like a trap. For the first 2 years, Maddie truly believed she had walked into a modern fairy tale. Bradley knew exactly how to sweep her into a world she'd only seen through windows and movie screens. Rooftop dinners in Tribeca, Broadway shows with impossible-to-get tickets, surprise weekend drives upstate in his Mercedes. He brought her into spaces where men wore Tom Ford suits and women smelled like Dior. He introduced her as the smartest woman I've ever met, and Maddie glowed every time he said it. But fairy tales have a way of hiding shadows behind the sparkle. After their small wedding at a stone chapel in Connecticut, simple, elegant, perfect, Bradley insisted they move into his Tribeca loft. "It makes more sense," he said, brushing off her suggestion of finding a place together. "We shouldn't waste money on rent." In that moment, it sounded logical, loving, responsible. But it meant everything was in his name. One evening, while they unpacked, he laughed when he saw her old textbooks and her beat-up laptop. "Baby, you don't need these now. You have me." He kissed her forehead like it was a blessing. Maddie smiled, but something in her chest tightened small, barely noticeable, like a thread pulled too hard. Still, she pushed it aside. Love required compromise, right? Bradley's career soared shortly after. Stonebridge Capital was expanding, and Bradley became the firm's public face, charismatic, polished, camera-ready. Maddie often attended events at his side, standing among investors who spoke in cold numbers and colder humor. She always felt slightly out of place, like a guest in a world that wasn't hers. But Bradley's hand on her waist made her feel anchored, until slowly, quietly, he began to let go. It started with little things. "You don't really need your job, do you? I make enough for both of us. You should relax more, Maddie. Enjoy life. You work too hard for someone who doesn't have to. You don't need to impress anyone. You have me." He framed it as love, as protection. Yet each sentence clipped a piece of her wings. Then came the miscarriage. It was early, too early for most people to know, but it broke something inside her. She needed comfort, reassurance, a partner to hold her through the storm. Bradley gave her 3 days of gentleness before returning to his routines. "We'll try again," he said casually, as if they'd lost a plane ticket, not a heartbeat. Maddie stopped talking about her grief. Bradley stopped asking. After that, he wanted her home more often. He'd text her during work. "When will you be done? Why are you staying so late? You know it doesn't look good if my wife is never home." Little by little, pressure became persuasion. Persuasion became expectation. Expectation became control. And control, once normalized, becomes invisible. The night Maddie finally resigned from her job, Bradley hugged her like she'd just saved their marriage. She didn't know she had just surrendered the last piece of independence she had left. If Maddie had paid closer attention, she would have noticed the cage forming long before it closed around her. But cages built from affection don't look like prisons at first. They look like safety, security, love. In the months after she quit her job, Bradley became more attentive, but not in the way she once admired. It wasn't flowers or dinner dates or stolen moments of tenderness. It was monitoring, tracking, correcting. At first, it was almost sweet. "Text me when you get to Starbucks, okay? Just so I know you're safe. Let me handle the bills. You don't need that stress. Wear the blue dress tonight. It makes you look polished." Small things, quiet things. But then he asked her to delete her LinkedIn, to prevent recruiters from bothering her. Then to stop meeting old coworkers because they only fill your head with pointless ambition. Then to step back from volunteering at a community center in Queens because you don't need to be around people who drag you down. He never yelled. He never slammed doors. His control always came wrapped in warmth, in logic, in phrases like, "Trust me, and I know what's best. Hey, Spies," end quote, end quote. And Maddie, raised to be polite, accommodating, grateful, didn't argue. She told herself this was marriage. She told herself sacrifice was normal. She told herself loving someone meant letting them lead. But the truth was simpler. She was shrinking. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, she found a stack of envelopes Bradley had hidden in a drawer. Credit card statements, investment reports, notices about the loft. Everything was in his name. Every asset. Every account. Every future decision. She confronted him gently, nervously. "Brad, why aren't any of these joint?" I thought. He smiled as if she were adorable. "Sweetheart, I'm the financial one. It's just easier this way." "But what if something happened to you?" she asked quietly. "Well, that's why I'm careful," he replied. "You don't have to worry about things you're not built for." Not built for. She felt the words bruise. Later that night, at a charity dinner on Fifth Avenue, Bradley introduced her to a well-known donor as "my wife, Maddie. She doesn't work, but she has a good heart." The man nodded politely, already losing interest. Maddie's cheeks burned. When they got home, Bradley kissed her cheek, complimented her smile, and acted like nothing was wrong. As if he hadn't just erased her in public. That was the night she began waking up with a heavy ache behind her ribs, a quiet panic she couldn't explain. She browsed job listings at 2 a.m., but closed them each time, imagining Bradley's disappointment. She practiced interviews in the mirror, only to hear his voice in her head telling her no one needed her. The worst part? She believed him. Love had turned into a cage, and Maddie wasn't even sure when she had stepped inside. But the universe has a way of whispering warnings before the storm hits. And Maddie was about to hear the first rumble. The moment everything began to crumble wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors, no confession text messages. It started with perfume, not hers. A scent Maddie couldn't name, something sugary, youthful, almost synthetic, clinging faintly to Bradley's collar when he walked into the loft one Thursday evening. She had spent the whole afternoon preparing his favorite roasted salmon, even ironing the linen napkins he liked. She welcomed him with a soft smile, hoping maybe tonight he'd see her again the way he used to. But the moment he leaned down to kiss her cheek, the unfamiliar scent hit her like a slap. She stepped back without meaning to. Bradley barely noticed. He loosened his tie, tossed his Rolex on the counter, and sighed dramatically as if carrying the weight of the world. "Long day?" she asked, her voice careful. "You have no idea," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "The junior staff is incompetent. I swear I spend more time fixing their messes than doing actual work." He always complained about work, but he'd never come home smelling like someone else before. Maddie tried to brush it off. Perfume could linger in elevators, in conference rooms, in Ubers. She told herself not to be paranoid, not to be the jealous wife. But something inside her twisted. Later that night, while folding laundry, she noticed Bradley's shirt had a faint shimmer along the shoulder, microscopic glitter. She blinked. She didn't own anything with glitter. She didn't wear perfume like that. She didn't even go out anymore. A slow, nauseating dread crept up her spine. When she gently mentioned the smell, Bradley didn't hesitate. "Oh, that?" he laughed. "Probably one of the interns. They hug everyone after presentations. You know how Gen Z is." "If you do." He said it with confidence, so much confidence that Maddie felt foolish for even asking. But would an intern really hug him tightly enough to leave glitter on his shirt? She tried to sleep that night but kept waking to the faint scent lingering on his pillow. 2 days later, the scent returned. Stronger. She didn't say a word, but her silence sharpened her senses. She noticed Bradley's sudden obsession with his appearance. New suits, new cologne, whitening strips hidden in the bathroom drawer. He started working late more often, slurring stories about client emergencies he'd never mentioned before. And then came the email. A simple, stupid, careless mistake. As she sorted through the household bills on her MacBook Air, because despite what Bradley said, She liked understanding where their money went. She saw a notification pop up on his synced calendar. Dinner with LM. Don't forget the rose gold bracelet. Followed by a winking emoji. Maddie stared at the screen until the lines blurred. Her fingers went cold. Her breath caught in her throat. She clicked the event. It was at a midtown restaurant he once told her was too loud and tacky for them. Her stomach dropped. L.M. The name repeated like a drumbeat. Lacey Morgan. The intern. The girl who hugged everyone. The one who wore the sugary perfume. Suddenly the glitter made sense. The late nights. The dismissive comments. The cage disguised as care. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that Bradley had already replaced her long before she ever suspected a thing. And the cracks in her world were about to split wide open. The night Maddie's world finally collapsed didn't come with thunder. It came with quiet, too much quiet. Bradley had texted her earlier. Bored dinner. Don't wait up. Short, cold, typical. She should have believed him. She wanted to believe him. But the glitter on the shoulder, the perfume, the calendar alert, the lies that slid off his tongue too easily. Her instincts were screaming now, something they had never done before, not with this volume, not with this clarity. At 8:42 p.m., the rain started falling thin, icy streaks tapping against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Tribeca loft. Maddie sat on the couch, knees to her chest, turning Bradley's text over and over in her mind, like a sharp stone she couldn't drop. At 9:15, she tried watching TV. At 9:30, she tried reading. At 10:02, she gave up pretending. She grabbed her coat, slipped on her flats, and walked out the door. It wasn't planned. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't rage. It was survival. Her heart hammered as she stepped into the rain-soaked Manhattan streets, the air heavy with the smell of wet pavement and exhaust. She didn't care where she was going until her feet led her toward Midtown, toward the restaurant listed on Bradley's calendar, Nightingale and Bloom. Trendy, neon-lit, full of influencers and high-profile casual dates. The place Bradley once said was too immature for him. Inside, warm golden lights glowed against the rain outside. Couples laughed over cocktails. Music hummed low. Maddie stood frozen in the entryway, raindrops clinging to her hair. Then she saw them. Bradley and Lacey Morgan, sitting close, too close at a corner table. Lacey's hand on his knee. Bradley smiling the smile Maddie once thought was hers. A small rose gold bracelet box on the table. Maddie's breath left her body. Her vision blurred, not with tears. Shock was too cold for tears. Lacey saw her first. A flicker of triumph crossed her eyes before she masked it with fake surprise. "Oh my God, Maddie," she gasped, as if she were greeting an old friend. Bradley turned, and for a split second, his face registered something raw, guilt or panic. She couldn't tell. But it vanished instantly under a mask of irritation. "Maddie, what are you doing here?" he hissed, standing abruptly. "Are you following me?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. He grabbed her arm and pulled her a few feet aside, lowering his voice, but not its cruelty. "This isn't what it looks like," he snapped. "You're acting hysterical." Hysterical. The word sliced through her like a blade. "I saw your calendar," she whispered. He froze. For a moment, the facade slipped. But then, he straightened, jaw tight. "You're overreacting. Again. You always do this," he said, tone dripping with contempt. Lacey needed career advice. That's all. Behind him, Lacey twirled a curl around her finger, watching with gleeful amusement. The restaurant noise faded, replaced by a roaring in Maddie's ears. Something inside her finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, decisively. She stepped back, releasing his grip from her arm. "I'm done," she whispered. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was a eulogy. Bradley didn't realize it yet, but this was the night he lost control of her, and the night Maddie began reclaiming a version of herself she thought she'd buried forever. The courthouse on Center Street always looked intimidating, from the outside columns towering like judgment itself, but inside, it felt even colder. Sterile, echoing, a place where futures were dismantled with the stroke of a pen. Maddie sat at the petitioner's table, hands clasped so tightly in her lap she could feel her nails digging into her palms. Her lawyer, a kind woman named Denise, whispered last-minute reminders, but none of the words felt real. Everything sounded distant, like she was underwater. Across the aisle, Bradley looked perfectly put together, navy suit, polished shoes, hair styled with that expensive matte pomade he loved. Lacey sat behind him, wearing a soft beige dress and a sympathetic expression she absolutely did not mean. Every now and then, she squeezed Bradley's shoulder like she was comforting a grieving widower. The audacity made Maddie's stomach twist. Judge Rosenberg shuffled papers, sighing through her glasses. "Mrs. Stone, Miss Harper, now you are aware of the terms proposed." Maddie nodded. Her throat felt too tight to speak. The settlement offer lay on the table in front of her. No property. Minimal alimony. No claim to the Tribeca loft. No share of Bradley's assets, investments, or accounts. Just a small, one-time payout that barely covered 3 months of rent in Manhattan. A payout Bradley's team phrased as generous given her lack of contribution. Lack of contribution. The phrase replayed like a cruel joke. Her lawyer argued. She really did. But Bradley had brought a legal army, 3 attorneys, in sleek black suits, armed with curated emails, manipulated timelines, and carefully selected character witnesses. They painted her as emotionally fragile, professionally unfocused, dependent. They described her miscarriage as evidence of stress instability, twisting her deepest wound into ammunition. When Denise objected, Bradley's lead attorney, silver-haired, smooth-voiced, only smiled a thin, victorious smile. "Your Honor," he said politely, "our client simply wants a peaceful resolution." Peaceful. As if he hadn't been cheating. As if he hadn't gaslit her for months. As if he hadn't destroyed her, piece by piece. Meanwhile, Bradley avoided meeting her eyes entirely. And that hurt more than the lies. When the judge asked if Maddie wanted to speak, Denise squeezed her hand, urging her to share her side, tell her truth. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. But Maddie couldn't. She looked at Bradley, at Lacey, at the lawyers waiting to twist her words, at the judge who already looked exhausted, and she realized something. Nothing she said would matter here. Bradley had the money. He had the narrative. He had the advantage. Nobody wanted the messy truth. So Maddie did the only thing she had left. She protected what remained of her dignity. "I have nothing to add, Your Honor," she said softly. Bradley's shoulders relaxed. Lacey smirked. Denise deflated beside her. The judge nodded, relieved. "Very well. Divorce granted." With one tap of a gavel, her marriage, her sacrifices, her dreams turned to dust. As she stood to leave, Bradley leaned toward her, voice low, smug, and dripping with false pity. "You'll thank me one day," he whispered. "You're not built for this world, Maddie. Let it go." She didn't answer. But something silently ignited in her chest, something sharp, something bright, something no one in that courtroom noticed. A beginning. Bradley thought he'd won. He didn't know he had just created the woman who would one day ruin him. The day Maddie moved out of the Tribeca loft, New York felt louder than usual. Sirens blared, cars honked. The city pulsed with a life she no longer felt part of. Her entire marriage fit into 6 cardboard boxes. 1 for clothes, 1 for books, 1 for kitchen items, and 3 for memories she wasn't ready to look at. She dragged them herself down the polished lobby where the doorman avoided her eyes. She wasn't Mrs. Stone anymore. She wasn't anyone. Her Uber driver helped load the boxes. "Rough day?" he asked gently. She nodded. That was all she could manage. Her new apartment on the Upper West Side was tiny, just 1 room with a narrow bed, a single window facing a brick wall, and a kitchenette barely wide enough to open the fridge door. The landlord, a wiry man with thick glasses, handed her the keys and said, "Welcome home," with a kind smile. Home. The word stung. She set her boxes down and sank onto the edge of the bed. Her bank account balance flashed in her mind like a warning sign. The settlement, money so little. The job prospects non-existent. The loneliness suffocating. She spent the first night staring at the ceiling, listening to her upstairs neighbor pace across creaky wooden floors. At 2:14 a.m., she pulled her knees to her chest and finally cried, not for Bradley, not for the marriage, but for the years she'd lost being someone she didn't recognize. The next morning, she forced herself outside. She walked to Starbucks because it felt familiar, safe, and bought the cheapest black coffee on the menu. She sat by the window, watching the city rush past, feeling like she'd been dropped onto a different planet. Her phone buzzed. "Maya. I'm outside." Maddie blinked. She hadn't texted anyone, not even her best friend, about the move. When she stepped outside, Maya wrapped her in a fierce hug. "I knew you'd try to disappear. Not today," she said firmly. They walked through Central Park, fall leaves crunching underfoot. Maya asked nothing. She just listened as Maddie spoke haltingly at first, then like a dam had broken. When Maddie finished, Maya squeezed her hand. "You tried to survive a man who wanted to erase you. That's not failure, Mads. That's endurance." That afternoon, Maya helped her set up the apartment string lights, a thrifted rug, a cheap but sturdy desk where Maddie could work again. It didn't feel like home yet, but it felt less like exile. That night, alone again, Maddie opened her laptop to restart her job search. But the job market had moved on without her. Too many gaps in her resume. Too many skills she hadn't been allowed to use. Too much self-doubt eating her alive. She closed her laptop, chest tight. Then an email notification pinged. From Ethan Callahan's office. Subject: Consulting opportunity, immediate. Her breath stilled. Ethan Callahan. The tech billionaire she'd once impressed years ago. The man she assumed had forgotten her existence. The message was brief, professional, almost cold. "Miss Harper, we're expanding our data strategy team. Your name came highly recommended. If you're available, we'd like to meet. E. Callahan." Her hands trembled. It felt like the universe had cracked open a door she thought was permanently sealed. Maddie didn't know it yet, but this email wasn't just an opportunity. It was the beginning of her rebirth. The lobby of Callahan Analytics felt like another universe: polished marble floors, 60-foot glass walls overlooking the Hudson River, and employees who moved with sleek confidence. Maddie had never stepped into a building where silence felt so expensive. She almost turned around twice before reaching the reception desk. "Madeline Harper," she told the receptionist, trying to steady her voice. The woman gave a courteous smile. "He's expecting you." He. Not the hiring manager. Not the team lead. He. Ethan Callahan didn't do interviews. He didn't meet candidates. He barely left the top floor unless it was for congressional hearings or private dinners with other billionaires. So why her? An assistant escorted her into a private elevator. As they rose through the floors, Maddie caught her reflection in the mirrored doors. She had done her best: clean ponytail, pressed blouse, borrowed blazer, but she still looked like a woman who'd been cracked open and was trying to hold herself together. The elevator stopped with a soft chime. The doors opened into a minimalist office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Light poured in like liquid gold, illuminating the man standing with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. Ethan Callahan. He turned slowly, and Maddie's breath hitched. He was exactly as she remembered: sharp jawline, steady eyes, dark hair brushed back with effortless precision. But there was something else now: gravity. The kind that came from power, influence, and knowing the world listened when he spoke. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice smooth, calm. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," she replied, though it felt like her vocal cords barely cooperated. He gestured for her to sit at a conference table that looked untouched, as if no one was allowed to leave fingerprints on it. "I heard about the divorce," he began. Her stomach twisted. "News travels fast," she muttered. "In my world, it does." His tone wasn't gloating or nosy, just factual. He opened a folder and slid a document toward her. "I reviewed some of your old analytic models," he said. "You see patterns most people miss." "That's rare." Maddie blinked. "Those were years ago. Thanks for watching." "And still more accurate than what my current team produces." The room seemed to tilt. He wasn't offering her pity. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering respect. She stared at the contract: consulting work, flexible hours, high pay, and direct collaboration with his data leads. It was more than she'd ever earned in her life. I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, hating the tremble in her voice. Ethan leaned back slightly. "You survived something most people never recover from," he said. "That tells me you're more than ready." Her throat tightened. "Why me?" she whispered. He studied her for a moment. "When we met years ago, you corrected a broken algorithm while 3 senior analysts sat frozen," he said. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't grandstand. You just solved it. I don't forget people like that." Maddie felt something warm push against the coldness that had been living in her chest for months. A flicker of who she used to be. Ethan closed the folder. "This is your second chance," he said quietly. "Take it, Or don't. But don't let anyone convince you you're small. Her breath shook. This wasn't pity. This wasn't rescue. This was recognition. And for the first time since the night she caught Bradley with Lacey, Maddie felt a pulse of something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The first morning Maddie walked into her tiny Upper West Side apartment as an employed woman. Again, something inside her shifted. Not a dramatic transformation, not yet, but a quiet recalibration. Like her spine remembered how to stand a little straighter. She set up a workspace on the small wooden desk Maya had found at a thrift store. She didn't have much. Her old refurbished MacBook Air, a stack of notebooks, a cheap desk lamp from Target. But when she sat down, opened her laptop, and saw the email from Ethan's team with her first data set, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. The work was intense, complex algorithm audits, pattern mapping, statistical breakdowns. Maddie hadn't touched in years. She was rusty at first. Her fingers hesitated on the keyboard, her brain lagged behind the numbers. But by day 3, she was flying. The old instincts came back like muscle memory, sharper than she expected. She found errors the junior analysts missed, caught trends buried so deep the average consultant never would have seen them. Ethan's team began looping her into more meetings. They started ending their emails with, "Good catch, Maddie. Brilliant insight. How did you even spot this?" Each compliment felt like a warm hand pulling her out of a dark well. Still, she kept everything quiet. No social media posts. No LinkedIn updates. No announcement. She didn't want Bradley to know she was rising again, not yet. Her silence had once been a prison. Now, it was strategy. At night, when the city hummed outside her small window, she'd review her budget. The consulting pay was generous, shockingly so, but she was cautious. She saved every dollar, cooked simple meals, held on to her Metro card like a lifeline. Maya teased her for being a financial squirrel, but Maddie didn't mind. She was rebuilding from dust. Every small victory mattered. One Thursday afternoon, she received an unexpected invite. Meeting with E. Callahan, 4:30 p.m. Her pulse quickened. When she arrived at Hudson Yards, the elevator whisked her up to the top floor again. Ethan was standing by a digital wall, displaying a massive data projection live analytics glowing in neon blues and greens. "You found something," he said without turning around. Maddie swallowed. "Yes, a discrepancy. A big one. Duos." She handed him a printed report, highlighted patterns, flagged anomalies, projected risks. Ethan flipped through the pages, brows tightening. "This is related to a hedge fund division. Stonebridge Capital." The name hit her like a punch. Her voice was barely audible. "Bradley's firm." Ethan finally looked at her. "You don't have to be involved," he said carefully. "I didn't know your findings would touch anything personal." But Maddie straightened her shoulders. "No, I want to see this through." His expression softened, just slightly, not pity, respect. As she turned to leave, Ethan added, "I'm hosting a gala presentation next month. You'll be featured on the strategic team list." Her breath stilled. "That's public." "Yes." She hesitated. "People will talk." "They already do," he replied calmly. "At least let them talk about the right version of you." She stared at him, unsure whether to be terrified or grateful. The truth was, she wasn't ready to be seen. But she also wasn't ready to live small anymore. As she rode the elevator down, her reflection trembled in the mirrored wall, but her eyes looked clearer than they had in years. She wasn't the woman Bradley broke. Not anymore. Maddie didn't recognize the woman staring back at her in the elevator's mirrored walls. Not entirely. Not yet. But there was something different in her reflection, an alertness, a groundedness, a soft but unmistakable flame behind her eyes. The next few weeks moved fast. Her consulting role expanded rapidly. Ethan's team started forwarding her the toughest assignments, projects that used to take entire departments weeks to interpret. She handled them with quiet precision, delivering results that made even senior analysts blink twice. What surprised her most wasn't the complexity of the work, but how much she had missed this part of herself, the version who could look at a chaotic dataset and see a story no one else could. A version Bradley had spent years convincing her wasn't valuable. Her team soon learned something else. Maddie didn't talk much, but when she did, people listened. And Ethan did more than listen. He watched, carefully, thoughtfully. Not in the predatory or possessive way Bradley once did, but like a man studying a rare constellation, one he didn't want to scare away. One afternoon, after she'd presented a tightly structured analysis to his board, Ethan pulled her aside. "You should present at the gala next month," he said simply. Her heart slammed into her ribs. No, I can't do that." "You can," he said. "And you should." "I'm not built for that kind of spotlight." "You're more built for it than the people who chase it," he replied without hesitation. His confidence unsettled her, not because she didn't want to believe it, but because deep down, she did. But being seen again meant something else. It meant Bradley would see her. And she wasn't sure which would hit him harder, her success, or the fact that she no longer needed his validation to breathe. One night, she stayed late at the office. The floor was mostly empty, except for the cleaning crew and the security guard humming old Motown songs by the elevator. Maddie scanned through the data on Stonebridge Capital numbers, behavioral patterns, fund offsets. Something had been gnawing at her mind since the day she'd identified the anomalies. She dug deeper and deeper until the room felt colder. Stonebridge wasn't just misreporting numbers, they were rerouting funds to shell accounts in ways that could collapse entire portfolios. It was bigger than Bradley, bigger than the divorce, bigger than anything she had imagined. Her pulse raced. She sent the report to Ethan immediately. 10 minutes later, he appeared in the doorway of her workspace, tie loosened, eyes sharp. "You just uncovered a $20 million fraud pipeline," he said quietly. Maddie's breath hitched. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," he corrected her. "You meant to see the truth. That's what you do." His praise hit deeper than any insult Bradley had ever thrown. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss or recovery, but by possibility. Ethan looked at her long enough for her skin to warm. "You know what this means, Maddie," he said. "This will expose people. Important people." She swallowed. "Including Bradley." Ethan nodded. "Are you afraid?" She thought she would be. But she wasn't. "No," she said. "Not anymore." A hint of approval flickered in his eyes. In that quiet moment, surrounded by glowing screens and the hum of servers, Maddie understood something she had never understood before. She wasn't the woman Bradley had erased. She was the woman he never thought she could become. And she was just getting started. Maddie had always thought strength was loud, confident, extroverted, bold. But rebuilding her life taught her something different. Real power grows quietly, like roots under concrete. And her roots were spreading fast. Over the next month, Maddie worked relentlessly. Her days started with cheap black coffee from the corner deli and ended with spreadsheets glowing across her tiny apartment walls. She reviewed algorithms until her eyes blurred, cross-checked financial patterns until the sun rose over the Hudson, and took feedback from Ethan's team like a woman determined to reclaim years she'd lost. But this time, she wasn't doing it for Bradley. She wasn't doing it to prove she was worthy. She was doing it because she finally remembered who she truly was. One evening, she received a message from Ethan. "Come upstairs. Need to discuss your findings." Her heart ticked faster. When the elevator doors slid open onto the top floor, she found Ethan standing beside a massive digital display. It showed a web of numbers, connections, offshore accounts, Stonebridge's corruption glowing like a constellation of deceit. "You didn't just find inconsistencies," he said. "You found intentional manipulation." Maddie swallowed. "How big is it?" Ethan turned to her, voice calm but razor sharp. "Big enough to trigger federal investigations." She felt the room tilt. Bradley had always been ambitious, but criminal wasn't a word she'd ever associated with him. Ethan watched her closely. "If this becomes public, you'll be pulled into it. Your marriage, your name, everything will be examined. You sure you're ready for that?" For a moment, fear whispered through her like winter wind. The old Maddie, the one Bradley molded, might have crumbled. But the woman standing beside Ethan wasn't that version anymore. "Yes," she said softly, "I'm ready." A hint of something respect, admiration, maybe even pride flashed through Ethan's eyes. Later that night, back in her apartment, Maddie opened her laptop again. She reviewed every document she had flagged on Stonebridge, making sure she hadn't imagined the patterns, the discrepancies, the misdirected accounts. She hadn't. She also hadn't imagined that someone else was accessing the same files. Someone inside Stonebridge. Someone sloppy. Someone desperate. And suddenly, it clicked. Lacey. She had access through the PR department, enough to clean narratives, delete old reports, shape external messaging, enough to hide a crime if she needed to. Maddie leaned back in her chair, breath unsteady. This wasn't just a cheating scandal. This was a cover-up, one she'd stumbled straight into. Her phone buzzed. Maya, are you alone? Maddie frowned. Yes. Why? Maya responded instantly. Check your ex's social. He and Barbie too are celebrating something. Against her better judgment, Maddie opened Bradley's page. A new photo. Bradley and Lacey, sparkling champagne in hand, grinning like a couple who believed the world existed to applaud them. Caption: honored to announce our keynote sponsorship for the Metropolitan Impact Gala next month. Maddie's breath caught. The same gala Ethan had invited her to. The room felt suddenly smaller. Her pulse hammered. Two worlds were about to collide in one room, hers and the one she escaped from. Her past and her rising future. Her silence and her truth. And something told her the gala wouldn't just be an event. It would be the battlefield. 2 weeks before the gala, the attacks began. Not physically, not openly, but in the most New York way possible, through whispers, anonymous posts, and carefully curated rumors meant to cut deeper than any knife. It started on a small finance gossip page known for exposing scandals in Manhattan's elite circles. Maddie never checked sites like that. She didn't have the stomach for it, but Maya burst into her apartment one night, phone in hand, eyes blazing. You need to see this, Maya said. Maddie took the phone reluctantly. At the top of the page was a blind item. Guess which ex-wife of a rising political figure is trying to weasel her way back into the finance world. Sources say she's emotionally unstable and only got work by playing victim to a powerful tech executive. Sad. Her hands trembled. She didn't need a name to know exactly who wrote it. The wording was too familiar, too polished, too cruel in that specific way only Lacey mastered. Bradley must be loving this, Maya muttered. But Maddie wasn't thinking about Bradley. She was thinking about the person she used to be, the woman who would have curled into a ball, believing every accusation, letting shame swallow her whole. But that woman was gone. Still, the rumor spread fast. Within days, Maddie received strange looks during team meetings. Some analysts whispered behind screens. A few stared in a way that said they were trying to figure out if the rumor was true, if she really had clawed her way into Ethan's orbit through pity. The old Maddie would have panicked. The new Maddie swallowed the hurt, raised her chin, and kept working. Yet the attacks didn't stop. Another blind item appeared. Insider tip. Our favorite silent ex-wife is planning to ambush her ex at an upcoming gala. Desperate, pathetic, or both. Then a comment under it. He left her for a reason. Another. She should have stayed quiet. One night, as she sat alone at her desk, staring at the hateful words glowing from her phone, she felt a sharp ache behind her ribs, the kind that comes from wounds not fully healed. Her phone buzzed. Ethan, are you awake? She hesitated before replying. Yes. Seconds later, her phone rang. His voice was low, steady, grounding. You saw the articles. It wasn't a question. I'm fine, she lied. Maddie, he said, voice softening in a way he rarely allowed. Lies are for people who want to hide. You don't hide anymore. Her throat tightened. I don't want this to hurt your company, she whispered. It won't, he said firmly, but we're not letting this go. She blinked. What do you mean? We're identifying the source. And when we do, the consequences won't be subtle. She didn't know if Ethan meant legal consequences, social ones, or something far quieter and more devastating. But hearing someone powerful, stand behind her, it felt like oxygen. The next morning, as she walked into the office, she sensed a shift. People still whispered, but now with curiosity, not contempt. Her inbox chimed. A message from Ethan. Found the source. We'll discuss this afternoon. She froze in her chair. If he found the source, that meant it was definitely Lacey. And if it was Lacey, then Bradley's carefully controlled world was about to take its first crack in public. And cracks, once they appear, never stay small. Ethan's office was dim when Maddie walked in that afternoon. Only the glow of the digital wall lit the room, an ocean of shifting numbers and connection lines. He didn't look up right away. He was studying a cluster of red nodes pulsing like a heartbeat. When he finally turned, his expression told her everything. It's her, he said. Maddie didn't need clarification. Lacey, Ethan nodded. She's been posting under multiple anonymous accounts. We traced the metadata. Childish work. Honestly, she thought a VPN and a burner profile were enough to hide her. Maddie felt her stomach twist. She's attacking me to protect Bradley. If we won. Ethan held her gaze. No, she's attacking you because she's afraid of what you found. That made her blink. What do you mean? Ethan walked closer, hands in his pockets, gaze sharp but controlled. You found the start of Stonebridge's fraud ring, he said. But you didn't find the root. He tapped the red nodes. Lacey's been deleting digital trails, emails, reports, transfer requests. She's been cleaning for someone much higher than your ex-husband. Maddie's breath caught. Higher than Bradley? Much higher, Ethan said. Bradley's not the mastermind. He's just the public face, a useful idiot. The words hit her like a slap. Bradley wasn't the villain? He was just a pawn? Part of her felt sick. Part of her felt relieved. Part of her felt furious that he had dragged her down for something he didn't even understand. Ethan continued. The real architect of the fraud sits on Stonebridge's executive board, a man named Daniel Mercer. Maddie stiffened. Mercer? He came to our wedding. Yes, Ethan said. And now he's laundering funds through offshore accounts connected to charities Bradley is promoting. Her pulse hammered. Charities he's promoting, including the Gala? Exactly. Ethan stepped even closer. Tomorrow's Gala isn't just a fundraiser. It's a PR cover for a major illegal transfer. Money that's supposed to go to humanitarian aid will be rerouted before midnight. Maddie swallowed hard. And Lacey has been covering the digital footprints. Right. Ethan's voice lowered. But here's the twist. Even she doesn't know. He pressed a button on the digital wall. New data strings appeared, ones Maddie didn't recognize. You built the audit system they're now trying to outsmart. Her eyes widened. No, she whispered. I didn't. Yes. Ethan's voice softened. Years ago, when you were still an intern, you wrote a pattern recognition model that flags suspicious financial behavior. Mercer stole the framework and used it to mask his own fraud, never realizing the person who wrote it would one day return. A dizzy wave washed over her. Her old work, her forgotten internship, her abandoned algorithm. It had become the trap that would catch them all. Ethan watched her carefully. Maddie, you didn't just uncover fraud. You built the system that will expose it. Her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the edge of the table. What happens now? She whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. Tomorrow night, at the Gala, Stonebridge will finalize the transfer, will present your findings, and their world will fall apart. She stared at him, breath trembling. And Bradley? She whispered. What happens to him? Ethan didn't look away. He chose the wrong side. And tomorrow, he'll pay for it. Lightning crawled up her spine. Tomorrow wasn't just a gala. It was Judgment Day. And she was the woman holding the match. For the first time in a very long time, Maddie stood in front of a mirror and didn't look away. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the quiet wife who once shrank herself to fit Bradley's expectations. This woman was sharper, steadier, a little haunted, yes, but stronger than she'd ever been. The afternoon sun streamed through her apartment window as Maya stood behind her, zipping up the deep emerald gown they'd chosen together. It wasn't loud or flashy, just elegant, sculpted, powerful. The kind of dress that didn't scream for attention but commanded it anyway. Turn around, Maya said. Maddie did. Maya's eyes softened with pride. Bradley's not ready for this version of you. I'm not doing it for him, Maddie whispered. Exactly, Maya nodded. The plan was simple on paper, terrifying in reality. Maddie would attend the Metropolitan Impact Gala as a strategic partner to Callahan Analytics. Ethan would present their findings on global data, transparency, carefully worded, of course, but embedded within the presentation would be the pattern anomalies pointing directly to Mercer's fraud scheme. Enough to trigger the right people. Enough to slam open the investigation. Enough to ruin Stonebridge's pristine facade, Bradley included. Still, the emotional weight hit harder than she expected. She sat on the edge of her bed and wiped her palms against her gown. What if I freeze? What if I fall apart when I see him? Then you'll get back up, Maya said simply, because that's who you are now. The knock on her door interrupted them. When Maddie opened it, her breath caught. Ethan stood in the hallway, dark suit, crisp white shirt, tie perfectly knotted. He looked like the kind of man who walked into chaos and expected it to bow. His gaze lingered on her. Not with possession, not with dominance, but with something quiet and reverent. "You look—" He stopped, recalibrated. "Ready?" For some reason, that single word steadied her more than any compliment could. They headed downstairs, where a sleek black town car waited. As Manhattan blurred past the windows, streetlights, restaurants, brownstones glowing with warm light, Maddie felt her heartbeat sinking with the city's pulse. Ethan noticed her fidgeting hands. "Nervous?" he asked. "Only a lot," she admitted. He smiled, not a corporate smile, not a polite one, a real one. "You already did the hard part," he said. "You survived him." Her throat tightened at the brutal truth of it. As they crossed into the upper edge of Midtown, the city shifted, taller buildings, wealthier crowds, polished black cars lining the streets. Ethan's driver pulled into a private entrance reserved for premier donors. Uniformed staff opened the door with crisp precision. Cameras flashed instantly. "This is it," Ethan murmured. "Not a warning, a promise." He offered his arm. This time, she didn't hesitate. She stepped out, heels clicking against the stone path, the night air cool against her skin. The gala lights reflected off her gown, catching in the folds like liquid emerald. People turned. Whispers sparked. Is that Maddie Harper? Bradley's ex-wife? With Ethan Callahan? Bradley's downfall had already begun behind closed doors. But tonight, the whole world would watch it happen. And for the first time, Maddie wasn't afraid. She was walking straight into her rebirth. The Metropolitan Impact Gala glittered like something pulled out of a dream, and also straight out of a nightmare. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden halos across marble floors and hand-carved archways. Classical music drifted through the hall as Manhattan's elite floated from table to table, smiling like their lives were already written in permanent ink. But tonight, the ink would smear. Tonight, everything would crack open. Maddie entered beside Ethan, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She didn't cling, she didn't need to. Her posture alone sent a message. She was no longer the woman who hid behind anyone. Every head turned as they stepped inside. Maddie caught the whispers. "That's her. Callahan brought her? Where's Bradley? Oh, he's going to lose his mind." She tried to ignore them, but her pulse fluttered. The air buzzed with expectation because this wasn't just any gala. This one was sponsored by Stonebridge Capital, the very firm planning to finalize their fraudulent transfer tonight. A server passed by with trays of champagne. Ethan took one glass for himself and one for Maddie. She didn't drink, just held it, letting the cool stem anchor her hands. "You okay?" he murmured. "Yes," she whispered, and shockingly, she meant it. They moved deeper into the room. Ethan greeted donors with the calm authority of someone used to bending billion-dollar industries. Maddie watched him weave through the crowd, always keeping her within the corner of his line of sight, a silent promise of protection, or maybe something more. But then, a familiar laugh sliced through the music. Light, sugary, rehearsed. Lacey. Maddie turned just as Lacey Morgan strutted through the entrance, wearing an elaborate champagne-colored gown that tried far too hard. Her curls bounced, her smile gleamed. She clung to Bradley like a designer accessory. And Bradley, he stiffened the instant he saw Maddie. His jaw tightened, his eyes widened, his carefully curated confidence leaked out like a punctured tire. "Maddie?" he breathed, as if saying her name confirmed his worst fear. Lacey's hand tightened on his arm. "Oh wow," she said with faux innocence. "Didn't expect to see you here, alone." Before Maddie could answer, Ethan stepped into view. "She's not alone," he said calmly. "She came with me. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be." Like a match dropping onto gasoline, the whispers ignited instantly. Lacey's smile twitched. Bradley's face drained of color. "You Callahan?" he stammered. "Since when?" "Since long before tonight," Ethan replied smoothly. Lacey hooked her arm tighter around Bradley, but her eyes darted nervously toward the stage, toward the servers carrying sealed envelopes Stonebridge planned to distribute to VIP guests. She was afraid. Good, she should be. Bradley forced a dry laugh. "This is cute, Maddie. Really, but you need to be careful. You're playing in a world you don't understand." The irony nearly made her laugh. Instead, Maddie straightened her shoulders. "Actually, Bradley," she said softly, "I understand it better than you think." Her voice was calm, steady, sharp enough to leave a mark. Before he could respond, an event coordinator approached Ethan. "Mr. Callahan, we're ready for your pre-presentation briefing." Ethan nodded and turned to Maddie. "Come with me." Bradley sputtered. "She's presenting?" Ethan offered a small smile, the kind that could slice a kingdom in half. "She is the analysis." Lacey's face went slack. Bradley's fingers twitched. The room seemed to tilt. As Maddie walked away on Ethan's arm, leaving Bradley drowning in his shock, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. And tonight, she would finally use it. The private briefing room behind the Gala's main hall felt colder, quieter, like the air itself understood something monumental was about to unfold. Dim lights reflected off polished oak tables, and the hum of distant music pulsed faintly through the walls. Ethan walked in first, Maddie just a step behind. Several high-level donors, analysts, and board members waited around the table. Some straightened their posture the moment they saw Ethan. Others stared openly at Maddie, whispering behind their hands. She ignored them. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of being watched. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said with calm authority. "Before we go on stage, there are updates you need to see." When he gestured to Maddie, the room shifted. Some eyebrows rose. Some lips pursed. One board member whispered, "Isn't she Bradley Stone's ex?" Maddie heard it. She didn't flinch. Ethan stepped aside, making it unmistakably clear. She was the center of this briefing. She moved to the front of the room, fingers steady as she tapped the screen to activate her data model. It illuminated instantly layers of algorithmic patterns, financial trails, and irregularities weaving across the display like a glowing digital map. The room fell silent. "This," Maddie began, "is Stonebridge Capital's humanitarian allocation pattern over the past 7 months. If you come at..." Her voice didn't shake. Not once. She clicked again. More patterns emerged. Shifts, spikes, sudden disappearances. These numbers don't align with legitimate outreach funding, but they align perfectly with the shell accounts created by Daniel Mercer. A ripple of shock spread across the room. One donor leaned forward. "Mercer? On our board?" "Yes," Maddie replied, "and the transfers are scheduled to complete tonight." During the gala, if you was if... Suddenly, the atmosphere sharpened, like oxygen had been replaced with tension. "And the laundering patterns are hidden by this algorithm here." She highlighted a code strand. "This was built years ago by an intern, a model designed to flag suspicious financial behavior." A board member frowned. "Who was the intern?" Maddie felt a heat rise in her chest, not shame, not fear. Pride. "Me," she said simply. Some jaws dropped. Others blinked in disbelief. "And the people laundering funds didn't realize the person who wrote the algorithm returned to the field," she added. "So they couldn't outsmart it." A stunned hush filled the room. Someone whispered, "She caught Mercer's scheme on her own?" Another muttered, "This could trigger a federal audit." Then, the door burst open. Bradley stormed in, face flushed, tie crooked, panic barely disguised beneath a thin veneer of authority. "What the hell is going on here?" he snapped. Ethan didn't turn. "Private meeting," he said coldly. "Leave." But Bradley's eyes locked onto Maddie, wild, frantic. "You think you're clever?" he spat. "You think you can embarrass me? At my event?" "It's not your event," Maddie said calmly. "It's Stonebridge's, and they deserve to know what's happening under their name." Lacey appeared behind him, breathless, mascara slightly smudged like she'd been crying or yelling. "Maddie, please," she said, switching instantly into honey-coated desperation. "You're misunderstanding. Bradley didn't know." "Mercer." Maddie cut her off. "I know Bradley didn't mastermind this. He's not capable." A shocked laugh rippled around the table. Bradley flinched as if she'd slapped him. Ethan stepped closer to Maddie, a silent show of solidarity. One donor spoke sharply. "Stonebridge will answer for this, starting with Mercer." His eyes shifted to Bradley. "And anyone who knowingly protected him." Bradley's face drained. Lacey swayed. Maddie didn't smile, but inside her chest, a quiet victory blossomed. For years, Bradley had spoken over her. Tonight, the only voice the room trusted was hers. The ballroom lights dimmed just as Maddie and Ethan stepped out of the briefing room. Music softened. A hush swept across the crowd like a tide pulling back before a storm. Hundreds of guests, CEOs, donors, reporters, political hopefuls gathered near the stage, champagne glasses glittering under chandeliers. Ethan leaned slightly toward her. "Ready?" he murmured. She exhaled slowly. "Yes." He stepped onto the stage first, greeted by applause that rolled across the room like thunder. Maddie followed him, not behind, not hidden, but at his side, visible to everyone who'd once looked down on her. Bradley and Lacey pushed frantically through the crowd, whispering to donors, trying to spin whatever narrative they could. But the room wasn't listening to them anymore. All eyes were on the stage. Ethan reached the podium. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate impact, transparency, and integrity." Subtle, controlled, deadly, Maddie watched from just behind him, hands clasped at her waist. She could feel the tension humming beneath the floor, buzzing in the air like electricity before a blackout. Ethan continued, "Our team has worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind global funding pipelines, and that truth is not always comfortable." He glanced at Maddie. "The signal?" She stepped forward. Whispers burst instantly throughout the crowd. Bradley's face blanched. Lacey froze mid-step. "Some of you know me," Maddie said, voice steady. "Some of you think you do. $2.25. Silence stretched taut. "But what many of you don't know is that 6 years ago, I built an algorithm to detect financial manipulation. That algorithm was stolen. And tonight, it revealed something critical." She tapped the digital remote. The screen behind them flashed to life numbers, diagrams, offshore routes, and financial trails. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. "These are Stonebridge Capital's transactions," she continued. "And these patterns reveal millions being redirected through shell accounts, set to finalize within hours." Chaos bloomed instantly. Reporters rushed toward the stage. Donors erupted in outrage. Security stiffened. Phones lit up across the room like a starfield. Bradley shoved his way forward. "This is nonsense," he shouted. "She's my ex. She's unstable. She hates." "Bradley," Maddie said softly, "stop." The microphone carried her voice across the room like a blade wrapped in velvet. "You didn't create this scheme," she said. "You barely understood it." Laughter, sharp, shocked, burst from a cluster of donors. Bradley's face flushed crimson. "She's lying," he roared. "She's doing this for revenge. She's been obsessed with ruining me ever since the divorce." Ethan stepped closer to the mic. "Mr. Stone," he said calmly, "your ex-wife uncovered what your executive board hoped would stay buried forever. If you're innocent, the investigation will clear you. If you're not..." He let the implication hang. The guests murmured like a rising storm. Then something no one expected happened. Lacey cracked. Right there, in front of the entire room. "Fine," she shrieked. "Mercer told me to delete the files. Bradley told me not to ask questions. They said it would protect the firm." The room exploded. Flashbulbs went off. Voices rose. Security headed straight for Bradley and Lacey as donors began demanding answers, shouting for the board. Bradley spun toward Lacey, betrayal slicing across his face. "You idiot, why would you say that?" "You told me it was safe," she cried. "You said she was too stupid to find anything." The entire ballroom turned toward Maddie again, but this time with stunned respect. Ethan walked to her side and murmured, "You did it." Her throat tightened. She didn't smile. Not yet. But inside, where the wounds once lived, something burned bright and triumphant. Tonight, the world didn't just watch Bradley fall. They watched her rise. Security escorted Lacey out, first mascara streaking, dress slipping off one shoulder, heels wobbling as she shrieked that she didn't mean anything. Her fall was fast, messy, humiliating. Cameras swarmed her like vultures. Bradley wasn't as lucky. 2 federal investigators, invited quietly by Ethan earlier in the evening, stepped forward through the chaos. Their badges flashed under the chandeliers, catching Bradley's eye like a gunshot. He froze. "Bradley Stone?" one of them asked. His voice cracked. What is this?" "We'd like to speak with you regarding Stonebridge Capital's offshore activity." "This is ridiculous," Bradley scoffed, forcing a laugh that broke halfway. "This is political, you don't understand. Mercer handled the accounts." "Your electronic signature is on every document," the agent said calmly. Bradley blanched. "You're lying," he whispered. "I never signed," Mercer said. "Lacey said someone forged." His excuses collapsed, one on top of another, sounding more guilty with each breath. Maddie watched from a distance, still, composed, almost serene. For years she'd been the one scrambling to explain, to justify, to shrink herself small enough to avoid his temper. Now it was him unraveling. Ethan stepped closer to her. "You don't have to watch this." "Yes," she whispered, "I do. It's no's." Because healing didn't always look gentle. Sometimes it looked like truth swallowing a liar whole. Bradley broke through the agent's hold and stumbled toward her. Maddie, please talk to them." His voice was wild, desperate. "Tell them I didn't know. You know I'm not smart enough to." He stopped himself, realizing what he admitted. The ballroom gasped softly. He tried again. "You loved me once. You owe me that." "Owe you?" Her voice was quiet but carried across the room. She stepped forward until only inches separated them. "I owed you loyalty," she said. "I gave it. I owed you honesty. I gave that too. I owed you grace, patience, commitment, and I gave all of it until there was nothing left of me." Her gaze hardened. "But I never owed you my silence, and I don't owe you protection." Bradley's mouth opened, then closed, like he was drowning on land. "Maddie, please." "No," she whispered. Just that one word. And the tiny thread holding Bradley's world together snapped. The agents moved in. "Mr. Stone, please come with us." Bradley struggled, looking around the room for anyone to defend him. Donors avoided eye contact. Journalists scribbled frantically. Even Lacey, sobbing in the corner, refused to look his way. He was alone. Truly, devastatingly alone. As they led him away, he called her name one last time, broken, angry, terrified. "Maddie." She didn't turn. Ethan stepped beside her. "You okay?" She nodded once. "It doesn't feel how I thought it would." "How does it feel?" She exhaled shakily. "Final." Ethan studied her profile, strong, steady, illuminated by the golden light of victory, and something softened in his expression. "Good," he murmured. "You deserve an ending." The ballroom slowly shifted back to noise, reporters rushing to file stories, donors calling attorneys, board members whispering about fallout. But Maddie felt strangely still. For the first time in years, the past was behind her. All that remained was whatever came next. In the days after the gala, New York buzzed like a wire about to spark. Stonebridge Capital collapsed under the weight of federal scrutiny. Daniel Mercer was indicted. Lacey fled to her mother's house in Florida, disappearing from social media entirely. And Bradley, once the golden boy of Tribeca, was splashed across every major headline for all the wrong reasons. Maddie Harper exposes multi-million-dollar fraud. Ex-husband Bradley Stone, under criminal investigation. For the first time, the world knew her name for her power, not her pain. She spent the morning after the gala sitting by her apartment window with a warm cup of coffee, letting sunlight spill across her small kitchen table. She expected to feel triumphant, victorious, maybe even elated. Instead, she felt something much quieter. Peace. A knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Ethan, no suit tonight, just a black sweater, sleeves pushed up, a softness in his eyes she had never seen in public. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. As he entered, he looked around the tiny apartment's string lights, thrifted rug, the desk where she rebuilt her life piece by piece. "You did all this alone," he said quietly. "I had help," she replied, thinking of Maya. "And him." Ethan took a slow breath. "There's something I want to give you." Her eyebrows lifted. "Ethan." "No gifts," he assured, raising his hand slightly. "Just an offer." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a contract, long, detailed, stamped with the company's seal. Callahan Analytics. Chief Data Strategist. Partner track. Equity included. Maddie's breath faltered. "This can't be right. This position. It's exactly what you've earned," he said firmly. "Your work changed the entire direction of our firm. You saved international funds from being siphoned. You stopped a criminal network. Maddie, you're not a consultant. You're an architect." She pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." He stepped closer, not too close, just enough that she could feel his presence solid and steady. "Say yes," he murmured. Her throat tightened. "I want to. I really do. But everything in my life has changed so fast." "Then let it." he said softly. You spent years shrinking yourself. Maybe now it's time to expand. She looked up at him, searching for any hint of pity. There was none. Only respect, admiration, and something warm that made her pulse flutter. Maddie, Ethan said, voice gentler now, I'd also like to take you to dinner, not as your boss or your partner, but something else, only if you want that. End quote. Her breath caught a mix of fear, hope, and the fragile possibility of happiness she had forgotten she deserved. Slowly, she smiled. I'd like that. His answering smile was small, sincere, and more beautiful than any grand gesture. He extended his hand. Not to lead her, not to guide her, but to walk beside her. She placed her hand in his. Warm, sure, steady. As they stepped out into the crisp Manhattan evening, lights shimmering above them, Maddie realized something profound. Bradley had taken years from her. But life, real life, was giving something back. Something better. Something true. And for the first time in forever, she wasn't looking behind her. She was looking forward. To a future she built. To a love she chose. To the woman she finally became. Madeline Harper wasn't silent anymore. She was unstoppable. So, that's how Madeline's story comes to an end. And if you're still here with me, still watching until this moment, then something in her journey must have touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself in her silence, her resilience, or the way she rebuilt quietly when no one believed she could. Life has a strange way of testing us through people who underestimate us. But as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Maddie's pain didn't stop her, it shaped her. It forced her to grow roots in the dark until she was strong enough to rise again. And that's the reminder all of us need. Your value doesn't disappear because someone fails to see it. Your strength isn't lost just because life breaks you for a while. Healing isn't loud, it's patient, it's quiet, it's yours. If Maddie's story moved you, inspired you, or helped you breathe a little easier tonight, then don't leave quietly. Drop a like, share this story with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe so you never walk this healing journey alone. We're here. Together. Always.